All right, so this is a demonstration on how to trim a multi-piece vessel. Just to show you the pieces really quickly. I've got a few pieces here I'm going to attach, 4 exactly. One of the pieces is just really a simple bowl. Another piece is more of like a cylinder that's kind of flared out. I have kind of like a little top here, or it could have been a chalice foot here, a little flared out, and then a little cup kind of bottom. This is going to be the foot of the pot. I'm going to assemble it right now so you can see. If you remember, the only measurement that I took with my calipers was the measurement of the diameter of the center pieces that connect. So I've got these 2 pieces here. I've got a measurement that I took here for both pieces that was the same. So I measured here. When I threw this, I took it off the wheel, and then right away, right afterwards, I made this one, and I measured it to the same. And they're pretty close. So that's the only real measurement I made. Right now, I'm going to trim all 4 pieces individually, and then I'm going to scratch and assemble the pieces together. And then I'll be ready to go to trim the entire thing once it's assembled. I'm going to do the whole process in this video. You might not be able to do all of it in one day. We'll see. Make sure that you have with you, during this whole process, when you're attaching, you're going to need some water with some slip. I have here. I have my trimming tools here. I have a metal rib. And for scratching and attaching, I have my scratching tool or a fork. And those are the main tools that I'm going to need. I have my gift and grip here as well, and I have my hands to trim with. There's 4 of them in class. If you don't have one, you can always just trim the regular way by tacking it down with some wad clay. All right, so I'm going to start by trimming. It doesn't really matter what I trim first. I'm going to trim the bowl first. So I'm going to attach it to my gift and grip, and I'm just going to basically trim it round with no foot. So pretty simple. So I'm going to make sure the first thing I do is make a little notch in the center for my finger. I'm left-handed. If you're right-handed, you could trim this way. And I'm holding my tool so that the clay will come off in ribbons. And I'm just rotating the tool down. I'm not trying to make this thin. Vases don't have to be thin because you're not holding them very much. I made it thicker on purpose so that when I'm attaching, it's a little more forgiving. And I'm going to end up trimming this vessel twice. So I'm going to trim it once now to get it to fit, and then I'm going to trim it again to make it all look uniform so you can't see the pieces that I trimmed. This is one that I made last year for the Greek project. You can see it's got a little Batman symbol on it, but this was made in 4 pieces, exactly what I'm going to do now, but it's difficult to see where those 4 pieces were attached. But it's going to be the exact same process, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to assemble those pieces and make them like this. Okay, so I trimmed the shape. I'm not going to worry about smoothing it with my rib quite yet. All I'm doing is trying to make a nice round ball. And what I will do is in the center, this is going to be the top of the vase, so there is going to need to be a hole in the center if I want this to go all the way through. So I will trim a hole now. I'm not really measuring the size. I just kind of eyeballed where I might want this to attach. I can always cut this higher or lower. So I know that I'll have the hole be a certain width. I can always make it a little bigger. So I'm just going to make a little hole. I'm using the corner of my trimming tool. You could use a pin tool as well. And I'm going to trim this little piece out all the way through. There we go. Okay. So now that I've trimmed it through, I have a little hole there. Okay. And that's this piece. 1 piece trimmed. Okay, I'm going to trim the other pieces the same way. This is the middle of the vase. I'm going to set it down. It's pretty thick too. I'd say at least a 1/4 inch throughout. I want it to be at least a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch so that I have room to trim. This is going to be the bottom, so this is going to attach to here. So I have a lot of clay at this base to remove. So I'll be doing that right now as well, and then I'll be putting a hole in here too. So grab my trimming tool. Make sure that I trim a little mark so I can hold it still. And then I'm going to trim this clay off. You could use these arms to hold it, But because this shape is wider at the base and narrower at the top, it's easy enough to hold down. And I can push down pretty firmly on this base here, because if I put a hole through it or I dented it, that's okay. It's going to have a hole in it later. So I'm just going to remove this clay. My trimming tools are very sharp, so it's easy to remove the clay. And the clay is perfectly at leather hard. It's soft enough to dent it with my fingernail, but it's not so soft that I can't, that I can like smush it with my finger, that it feels really damp or wet to the touch. So now I'm going to consider kind of the form itself. I'm going to bring this in, and at any point I could make this bottom part shorter if I needed it to be. Now again, I'm left-handed. I'm switching hands just so you can see what it would look like right-handed. I would usually trim this with just my left hand. The angle you hold the tools at's important. So if the clay's not coming off like this, change the angle until you feel it kind of bite in a little bit, and it starts removing clay in ribbons. Again, if your tools aren't sharp, we can sharpen them as well in class with the bench grinder. Okay. So this is going to be kind of an elegant base. It's going to have a very narrow base to it. Right now I'm just trimming the forms themselves. What you can also do, if you're trying to get a curve, you can take your metal rib and kind of trim with that a little bit. And you really can't see it from here, but you'll see clay come off. I'm just kind of angling the rib in, and it's going to remove a little bit of clay with the rib. And that's just going to give me a nice, very subtle kind of curve. It'll get out any of the flat spots in this angle. There we go. Good. I have this top here. I can trim this piece down and I can trim that piece down, so I'm not really too worried about how it fits quite yet. I will put a little hole in the bottom now though. There we go. Just going to take a hole. And the nice thing about this is when I put the hole in the bottom, I can reach my finger in and feel the thickness to see how far I can go in. If I'm trying to make this really taper to a thin point, I can kind of feel the thickness once I get a hole in there. So it's nice to get the hole in early. All right. So I've got my hole in there. I'm going to make it a little larger because it is pretty thick down here, so I do have some room, which is good. There we go. All right, it does get a little thinner. So right now I've got my finger on the inside, and it's almost like I'm at the same places where I'm throwing a cylinder upside down. I can feel the thickness, and at the very bottom I do have about a ½ inch right here, but when I get beyond a certain point, it does get a little thinner. Right about here, it's only about ¼ inch. So I've got to be careful trimming it here, but if I wanted to, I could bring this very last part in more, or I could cut it down. So that's pretty good. I'll check one more time. That's about the right width that I might want. And I could bring this little last part in later if I need to. So that's my second piece trimmed. All right. Now I'm going to trim, I'll trim the bottom, I guess, because this will attach. It's a smaller piece. I'm not going to be trimming it very much now. I'm going to leave the bottom solid because I want that bottom. This is the foot to my pot, and all I'm going to be doing is really just trimming it so that it looks a little more finished. And more than that, it's really about getting this bottom nice and flat, or actually curved a little bit to attach. So I just want to make sure that where I'm attaching it, it will be level so that my pot won't sit crooked. So I'm just trying to level out this top. The nice thing about a Giffen grip is I didn't check how thick this bottom was. I can always just take it off, check it, make sure it's a good thickness. It's about at ¼ inch, a little less, which is perfect. And then I can attach it right back on, and it's centered. I love a Giffen grip. Okay. So now that this is nice and flat, I do dome it a little bit, only like a little cup on the inside. I find that it's easier to attach if the center isn't the highest point, just because I can set it on there and it won't be a dome on the inside. It'll be easier to make it not rock around from side to side if I can get it to fit on one side. If I trim this round, sometimes when I'm pushing down on it, the foot will tend to slip. I'll show you when I flip it over. Okay, so one more piece to trim. That was a very simple trim. Last piece of trim is the top of the pot. Now when I trim this, I might not use all of this shape. I might take some of this down. I might only use this much. So what I'm going to do is again put a hole in the middle, because this is part of the top of the vase, and this thing might spin a little crooked. It kind of dried unevenly. We will see though. I'm going to put the hole in first. I can feel that I made this bottom thin, which is a good thing, because I didn't need to waste any clay. There we go. Yeah, nice and thin. And here's my trimming tool. Make sure we're nice and tight. And I can trim off any wobbliness by just holding my hands really still. If you feel like your pot is kind of wobbling, the key is just like centering, to hold your hands still while the clay is moving. I'm putting a little downward pressure on it with my hand and trying to hold my hands still. And this bottom is nice and thick. I knew I'd be trimming it. I still want to keep some of this flare here, but I know I'm not going to use all this clay on the outside. Alright. You can see there's very little measurement that I had to do. It's nice when you're making these because you can draw out an idea or a plan, or you can just make a bunch of parts. When I made this, I made about 3 of each part. Because I was making 3 of these at a time, and it's nice because you can mix and match. So you can make, 3 of these little kind of horns or trumpets, and you can mix and match them together. It's important that I level this part out now. When you're leveling it, if you push flat, it's really hard to hold your hand still. I find that if you take a little bit from the side right here and you just do a little bit at a time, it's a much easier job to flatten. Okay, so there we go. You can also use a pin tool. Hey, there we go. Perfect. Okay. And the nice thing is, no one's going to see it spin again, so the little wobble that it has, that'll be okay. I'm going to take my metal rib again and go in here and do a little bit of rib trimming to get this curve just right. So you can't see it on the camera, but I'm holding this at a pretty much a 90-degree angle, and it's kind of scraping off clay so that I get the curve of this rib pressed into here. Just like when we're throwing, just a little more aggressive, and got to hold a little firmer hand. All right, that's good enough for now. Okay, let's see what this thing looks like now that I can rough assemble it. So here would be the base. Top and top. There we go. So there's a very rough outline of what my pot's going to look like. I'm going to take a look at it now and see if I like it. And I do like it. There's a little space here where it's kind of wobbly. Once I attach it, I'll be able to trim all that stuff. I do actually like this size, the proportion of the opening to the width of the pot. I like that. I'm going to keep that. And then down here I will do a little bit of kind of blending work, maybe with my metal rib, with my trimming tools, to make this transition a little more natural. But I am going to really quickly slip it up and attach it like this. So I'm going to disassemble it real quick. And I'm going to work from the base up. Yeah, I'll work from the base up. I'm going to attach, let's see. It's a good question. How should we attach it? There's no wrong way. I can attach the center pieces together first. I can attach the bottom to the top first. There's no wrong way to do this. I think I'm going to work upside down actually. So the first thing I'll attach is this onto my base here. That seems like a good start. So I'll reattach this one that I just had attached. This edge here is a little thin for me. I'm going to just trim a little down, just a hair, to make it a little flatter and a little wider. I'm going to use some water, put it on there, and push down a little bit. And that's going to kind of thicken that edge just a hair. Okay, so I can be very generous with my scoring. While this is spinning on the wheel, I can kind of scratch it. Around this outside here on this one, I can just be really kind of loose with my scratching. I can always go back in and trim it. This is going to go back on the wheel, so if I scratch a little too much, it's a really easy fix. very thoroughly scratched. I've got some slip here. I'm going to just put some slip. This is actually just from the bottom of one of the hand washing sinks. One of the nice things about having our sinks have a little clay catch and only have clay wash in them, they kind of collect a really nice slip, and there's always a good generous amount of slip in the classroom that doesn't dry out in the sink. It doesn't smell very good, but it definitely does the trick. So I've got a scratched edge with slip. I only need it really on one edge here, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it on top. It kind of looks like a chalice now, small chalice, but what I can do now is I can take it and I can spin it and look at it to see if it's level. And if it's not level, I can stop the wheel and rotate it. I can try to hold it in place to make it level. And what I'm going to try to do is just get this to spin as evenly and as level as possible. Now, if I try to move it while it spins, you'll see it rocks around. When you've got it scratched like this, you know, you can set it down. You can use a pin tool or a sharp edge, and you can kind of try to measure the width there. I've got a little line on this side, and I'm going to maybe push it in a little bit that way. Okay, and my goal, it's not going to be perfect. When you make these larger pieces or these multi-sectional pieces, they're never perfectly even, or mine are never perfectly even. They do rock a little bit. It's just afterwards I can make sure that they sit level and they'll never spin again. So for right now, that's probably okay. I can see on the inside the connection, and I can see that it's spinning pretty uniform together. It's not really off on the inside. So the top will actually sit maybe a little crooked, but I can kind of hide that later. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take my finger and kind of blend that line in here and just kind of connect it here. And I can do that from the inside as well. And I'm on the inside here just kind of taking my finger and smoothing it out. There is a little extra space in between. I'll take it off so you can see. If you look on the inside, there's a little lip right here. I'm going to just kind of trim off a little bit of that lip so the opening is a little wider. If I was going to use this, let's say for flowers, I'd be able to get more stems in there. So I'll just give it a really quick little opening trim. It'll also let me blend it a little easier if there's not a little shoulder in there. So I just kind of trimmed it in a little bit. No one's going to ever see this seam. It doesn't have to be pretty on the inside unless you've got some OCD going on and you have to make the inside and the outside that no one will ever, or the inside that no one's going to see, really, really smooth and even. There we go. Okay. There. So now these are pretty well attached. I'm going to let those sit for a second. If I just start stacking pieces, this connection is still weak because it's wet. So I'm going to let that connection just sit. So I'll set this piece aside and go on to my next connection. So my next connection is going to be the bottom to the top. So I'm kind of working from both sides, connecting one piece to another, and then we'll connect the whole thing together at the end. This is something you could do in 2 days. You could trim one day, attach one day. You could attach, trim and attach two pieces, and then attach the whole thing the next day. It just depends on how much time you're willing to spend in class to get this done. So well, the first move I'm going to make is just to get this attached. I want to make sure that it's centered and still level. I've got my pieces that are going to attach here. And my job is going to be just to, again, scratch these pretty thoroughly. I've got this one on a wheel, so I can just kind of spin the wheel. I want to make sure that my lines are not just straight lines, that they go different directions. I don't want to just hold this down and kind of go like this. I like the lines being a little rougher and the surface being more abraded. So same thing here. I'm going to avoid scratching the center right here. You wouldn't be able to see it unless you saw it, like trying to light into it. But it's a place where like mold or something could grow. It's kind of like a spot that isn't smooth. It's hard to clean at the bottom. So I am being a little conscious of where I'm scratching on this piece here. I've got some of my sink slip. Who knows what's in it, but I've never had a problem. If there's a little paper towel or something in there, that's not going to hurt anybody. So, gonna scratch through the slip a little bit. I'm going to very lightly set this down. I'm going to spin the wheel, and with these two pieces it's a little easier to fit them because I've got a base to one. So I just basically stuck them on there, and those are spinning a little better, which is important. The bottom spins better than the top, and that means that it'll be a little easier to make level. So there's my connection. That looks great. I'm going to stop the wheel, kind of push it down a little bit. Right? I could take my finger and blend this line. This is not going to do anything to hide the shape of the line. It's just I'm holding it down and I'm trying to work this connection together. If I can see a little slip kind of squeeze out, that lets me know that I've got a tight kind of connection here. There we go. Okay. So let's see if we're still level-ish. And the nice thing is, if this thing wasn't level, I can always then just take this piece here and give it a little trim like this, because I did not trim this side of it, but now I can. I can just give it a quick trim, and now I know that that's pretty close to level. Now, this connection is a little more solid. I can actually start trimming it now. I'm just going to give it a quick kind of blending trim, and this is the beauty of multi-piece pottery. I can take it and trim it again and hide that seam so well that you'll never know where it was attached unless you saw this process. Okay. Take my rib, get back in there. And I like some defining lines. I think they actually further help to hide the blending, but I'm going to make a little line right here. It'll almost make it look like that's where it's attached. Slightly higher. You can see I'm pretty bent over right now, trying to make sure that I've got a nice line. And then maybe I'll put another line right here. Right? Kind of give it kind of a pedestal look. I have a great tool that's just a piece of tungsten carbide that's beveled like a chisel, and it's got nice sharp points on it. It really does help to make these nice detail lines. And then I might do actually just one more, and I think for me that's going to kind of obscure that there is a little transition issue here that I don't want to try to trim out because it is getting a little thinner. I'm going to pull another tool out that's a little more rounded, and I'm going to take that. I love my trimming tools. They're Bison tools. They're handmade, tungsten carbide. You got to be careful with them. They're expensive, but they just trim so nice. Okay. There we go. Those are light little lines. If I didn't like them, I could get rid of them. But there, my bottom is kind of trimmed. And again, I'm going to give this a final trim when it's all assembled. But now comes the fun part. I get to kind of look at what the pot's going to look like now that all the pieces are attached. All right. Here's my vase. And this would be an incredibly difficult shape to throw. But because I made it in pieces, it wasn't that hard. It's a few bowls and a few cylinders. So the last pieces to attach are these ones here. What I am going to do is take my Giffen grip, and change the direction. I hold the base wheel here. I rotate the bottom. I'm going to flip it so I can use the hands. A little taller than that. Probably go for the tallest ones maybe. We'll see where that holds it. And I'll try holding the pot upside down and right side up for attaching, or upside down rather, but either side can be touching the wheel. Whatever side it holds the pot better is probably going to be this way, upside down. It's probably my better move. What do you know? That's a decent spot to hold it. Maybe not. Maybe one lower. So a little setup here. had a student whose parent made me a little gift and grip holder for all these little tools I can leave here. It's nice. Organizes them all for me. All right. I want this thing when it's held to be held firmly and to not lift up. And it was lifted up a little more. It's still lifted up. It's a hard shape. Maybe I can hold it from the other direction. We'll see. It's fine. It should be okay. All right, so here we are. It is rocking a little bit. I'm not worried about that. Once I get it finally all attached together, I'll be able to give it a last final trim, and that will be the one that levels everything out. I'm just making sure this is nice and flat. I'm not trying to level it quite yet. I just want to get these pieces assembled. A fork works great for this scratching as well. Okay, so this is scratched here. While I'm waiting to scratch the other piece, I'll let some slip kind of soak in. Timing is really everything. This pot is perfectly leather hard. If you try to do this when it's too soft, things are going to start to collapse and sink. If it's too dry, it's hard to get them to connect and join together on the trimming wheel. So timing is everything. I threw these last night at about 8 o'clock at night, left them out in the studio, came back, now it's about 9 in the morning in California, and that's what worked today. So I'll scratch the other side here as well, making sure that I really rough the edge up. And the last part that I really need to trim is this connection here, because there are some lines that don't match up. I'm going to just actually put a little water on this too, just a little bit. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to set this on top, make sure it's even. Spin my wheel a little bit. And what I'm looking for is this top to see if it's level. And it's not level, but I understand that, and I understand why. I'm going to move this over a little bit. I'm more interested in it spinning straight than level right now. I can always level it a little bit by trimming this or the top, or kind of lightly pounding it down. I just want to make sure that this connection looks good. Go. Remove the gift and grip for a sec so it's not sitting on the gift and grip, and see if that's a little more accurate. And what I've got right now is it's got a high spot. So I'm going to mark that high spot by holding my hand still. There's my high spot. Wherever I drew a line is high. And I'm going to take that and just kind of push it down a little bit on that side and see what that does. That's a little better. That's good enough for me for right now. Okay, so I've got this connection here. I am going to lightly push it in from the bottom where it's wider to make sure this connection is made all the way around so it doesn't fly away when I start trimming it a little bit. Kind of pushing down and up together. If a little bit of slip comes out, that's good. Okay. Tighten my gift and grip. I wish I had arms that would hold it higher. I could flip it over and see if that works better, but it's always a trick trying to get these things to spin perfectly level. I find that I can tap it afterwards in the table if it's really leather hard, and I can get it pretty close. I'm just going to trim this connection here. I know that this bowl part's a little thicker, and that's the part I can trim more. So I'm going to trim that more. I'm kind of putting some downward pressure on the top. That's a good idea to make sure that this thing stays firmly attached. I like trimming on a kick wheel also because I can adjust the speed to what I need at the time. Okay. I'm just looking at the side profile, the silhouette, or the side of this pot here to see if I like the line that it makes. And it's not bad. It's good for a demo. I made these just as demonstrations of the project. These aren't really for anything. These are just a demonstration. Okay. I get to make 5 of them. All right, so I'm good with that. I have a little bit of water and I have a metal rib. Always lose this thing. And what I'm going to do now is all those scratch lines, I am going to get rid of them. I'm going to look, I have a sponge right here. Here we go. Here's my sponge. Got a little water from on top of my slip. I'm going to just put a little water on the surface, just a very small amount. When you're using water in a Giffen grip, it's really important not to let the water drip onto the wheel. It just makes a huge mess and it gets inside all the grooves. Try to just keep the water on the pot if you can. Hold my top down, and then I'm just going to use my rib and compress the outside with a little bit of water. And I am pushing a little firmer, so I don't want to have the wheel go too fast. I want to feel like I'm in control. And all I'm doing is kind of smoothing out all those scratch lines from the stoneware. If this wasn't stoneware, you wouldn't have to do it as much. This is the Class recycled clay, so it's actually a blend of about 30 clays from all over the Bay Area that I get free clay from. So, a little bit of everything. And going all the way up. And back down. And I would be really thorough with this if I had a really good plan for it. I am going to be using Terra Sigillata for the Greek project that we're doing. Put some handles on this thing. So I would want it a lot smoother than I'm making it now, but this is a pretty good start. I'm going to get all the way underneath there. When your clay's leather hard, you don't need a lot of water. You'll see I didn't put a lot of water on this thing. For the top parts where all these lines are, I use the back of my fingernail or the back of a tool and kind of burnish. Sometimes if I have my wedding ring on, I'll use that. Okay. All right. Well, I notice I've got a little chatter line here. I'm going to try to smooth that out. My tools are very sharp and the clay was wet, so sometimes a not as sharp tool does a better job. But I find that if I just do a little more ribbing, I can hide that a little better. Okay, finished product is always the best part, flipping it over and getting to see it for the first time. I kind of like it upside down too. That could be a vase in and of itself, a really nice footed bottle. But I made it this way. And there's the vase. So that was, what, 30 minutes. I trimmed it 4 pieces. I attached all 4 together and blended them together. The last thing I need to do is probably just smooth this edge out here as well. But if I spin this thing, which it'll never do again, after I'm done with it, I can try to see how level it sits. And that's not bad. I don't think anyone's going to notice that when it stopped. So I'm comfortable with it. That's pretty much the process of trimming 4 pieces after you've measured them, assembling them together after trimming them, and then giving them a once final trim. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Please pause it through each step as you're working together for my students so you can do each step with me. Don't watch the whole video and then try to do it. Maybe watch the trimming part, do that one day, watch the assembling part, do that one day, and break it up. It's always good to kind of have it fresh in your mind when you're working on it. So make 100 of them.